2 in 3 women are victim of violence in Papua New Guinea, compared to 1 in 3 women globally. The Global Partnership to End Violence is working to prevent violence against women. In an effort to raise awareness and create change surrounding this issue, the following video has been created. The United Nations defines violence against women as any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or mental harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion, and arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public or in private life. In Papua New Guinea, violence is not only highly prevalent but also is extreme. Women are often beaten and abused with weapons such as machetes and even guns. Papua New Guinea, commonly known as PNG, has a population of 8.3 million people and includes 600 islands. PNG is northeast of Australia. The diverse geography of regional, remote and urban areas includes difficult topography and a wide variety of culture. The majority of the population identify as Melanesian. There are over 800 known languages spoken, the most popular being English, Tok Pisin or Pidgin, and Hirimoto, the lingua franca of the Papua region. There are 117 government members that represent the regions and provinces in Papua New Guinea. In the last decade, the economy in PNG has expanded primarily due to mining and the gas boom. However, this wealth is not evenly distributed, and very few women profit. The diverse geographical and cultural landscape is a significant barrier to addressing the violence against women in PNG, reducing the capacity to respond to this issue. This results in a significant economic and social consequence for PNG, including loss of productivity due to less women in the workforce, significant cost increase burden on the healthcare and justice system. We are now going to tell you a story of a life as a girl in PNG. This is Nina. Her parents are expecting her to be born any day now. We are going to take a journey on what it could be like for Nina growing up as a girl in PNG. As a female, Nina is a primary target group of interpersonal violence, with her experiences of violence being exacerbated by the social determinants of health. This includes her socioeconomic position, education, occupation, income, social inclusion, social capital, employment status, safe and affordable housing, water and sanitation, and access to healthcare services. All of these things are out of her control and are causal links to the violence she experiences. First, we have to take a short journey through history. If Nina was to grow up in Bougainville, it means that her family is feeling the effects of the Civil War. Her parents have most likely received limited education and lost engagement with traditional values, causing them to feel displaced from their community. They may also be affected by substance abuse, PTSD, and limited employment opportunities, resulting in her family to be struggling financially. Men who experience 4 or more adverse childhood experiences are 8 times more likely to be a perpetrator of violence. In Nina's community in Bougainville, research conducted by Emma Fallu shows that 87.3% of 714 men had perpetrated some form of violence against their partner. This could be physical, emotional, sexual, or financial violence. When Nina is old enough to go to school, she could be forced to take a long, dangerous journey, with the risk of facing violence along the way. She could be sexually molested by her male classmates, but the teachers do little about it. Every month, Nina has to miss time at school because there are a lack of sanitary conditions to cater for her when she's menstruating. When Nina turns 15, she will be required to work in the gardens at home and help look after her brothers and sisters. She isn't able to finish her basic education. On average, girls receive 4.6 years of schooling, and only 9.5% of girls will receive some form of secondary education, and she has no chance of going to university. Women are more likely to experience intimate partner violence if they have a low education. This is one of the many social determinants of health.
If Nina is progressive or goes against traditional values, she becomes a target of violence. This is seen as a legitimate reason to be violent towards Nina, and as a result, the matter isn't taken to the village or district court. By the age of 21, Nina could be married to a man and he is required to pay a bride price. This patriotic activity persists, and as a result there is a long history of men feeling entitled to ownership and dominance over women. If Nina is infertile, HIV positive, in a polygamous relationship, or if her children die, she is much more likely to be a victim of violence. Nina's responsibility is farming and providing meals for her family. She isn't paid for her work, and the only way she can gain an income is to sell her fresh produce at the market. Nina doesn't own the land she farms, it is owned by her husband. These economic limitations increase Nina's risk of being a victim of violence. If Nina is very unhappy and is being hurt in her relationship, she would want to leave. For Nina, this isn't an option. The money her husband paid for her would have to be returned. Not only this, but Nina isn't allowed to own any property and has only been allowed to garden on her husband's land. This means that if Nina left her marriage, she wouldn't be able to survive because she has no financial independence. If Nina did have children, as soon as she left her marriage, she would lose custody of her children too. Nina decides to stay in her marriage and is regularly a victim of violence. One day, her husband may pass away. As a widow, Nina is in great danger. Witchery is deeply rooted in her culture and religion, and as a widow, it is likely she will be accused of sorcery. The Sorcery Act was lifted in 2013, but one can still be charged with witchcraft in a village court, and there are no consequences for witch hunting, torture, and killings. In Nina's life, the absorption of traditional and Christian values further deepen the patriarchal systems. If a woman ever goes to court for cases of violence, it is made up of almost entirely male members, and the assumption is made that women have earned beatings due to misconduct. Cases of violence are trialled locally, and in the rare case of a conviction, the only form of punishment is a fine. For women like Nina that experience violence, it negatively affects their physical, mental, sexual and reproductive health both short and long term, which in turn affects their children and families. Worldwide, women that experience violence are twice as likely to experience depression and almost twice as likely to have alcohol disorders. 16% of women are more likely to have a low-weight baby and are at 1.5 times greater risk of contracting HIV, syphilis, gonorrhea or chlamydia. 43% of women who are victims of violence have experienced physical injuries, and 33% of women's homicides were at the hands of their partners. These health outcomes have a considerable cost to the economy, with childhood maltreatment currently attributed to 2% of the GDP in the Asia-Pacific region. But this story isn't just about Nina. 2 in 3 women in PNG are victims of violence. Quote, "We are growing up with the anticipation that this is going to happen to us. I survived it, and that's the most important thing." Right now, many organisations and individuals are trying to help Nina. There are national and international efforts being made to prevent Nina being a victim of violence. Unfortunately, the current responses to violence against women are under-resourced and are unable to respond quickly and adequately. Furthermore, the cohesion and cooperation between government, NGOs, religious groups and other stakeholders are largely disjointed. As a result, improvements have not been seen.
As violence against women is normalised in PNG culture and is widely accepted, it is difficult to implement a preventative strategy which can help decrease the prevalence of violence. This can be attributed to culture, gender norms and power structures. With the support of the Australian Government, a number of NGOs, the Catholic Church and the PNG Government, there has been improvement in the establishment of a number of family support services. This includes family support centres, family sexual violence units and the PNG Family and Sexual Violence Case Management Centre. The Family and Sexual Violence Action Committee developed in 1999, the Criminal Code Act of 2002 and the Lucatum Piccinini Act of 2009 are examples of legislative change into violence against women and children. The aim was to ensure that any cases of violence against the woman or child was immediately taken to district or national court, with village court unable to have any jurisdiction under the law. However, this rarely happens. In 2008, the PNG government sent a delegation to the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. The delegation indicated compliance with 28 out of 113 indicators, partial compliance with 32 more indicators, and no compliance with the remaining 53 indicators, showing a significant and urgent need for improvement. This indicates that with a mix of legislative change and access to support services and healthcare services has unfortunately seen little improvement in the prevalence of violence against women. Therefore, it is recommended that this legislation and access to supportive services is strongly supported, with primary prevention that should focus on preventing violence before it occurs. Economic strengthening by creating jobs for women can be a rather ineffective strategy and can sometimes put women in even more danger, as Dr. Rumble comments.
Sometimes they're not well designed with the local economy in mind. So women are trained and they develop certain skills, but then she can't implement her skills because there's no market for it. They can also put girls at risk, especially for the younger group. When women and girls suddenly have access to assets, people want to take it away. So without proper safeguards on how she can save her money, how she can fight against all those other groups who want to access her money, what she does with that money, and the pressure on her to suddenly meet the needs not only of all those around her in her family, but in the broader community, can put stress, pressure, and even risk of violence. So it can work, but needs to be well designed.
Our recommendation is based off the Real Fathers initiative in Uganda, standing for Responsible, Engaged and Loving Fathers. The initiative recognised the desire of men to become better fathers. Through mentoring programs with trained and well-respected community leaders combined with an awareness campaign, it has been particularly positive in improving gender-based violence. It targets fathers and builds positive partnerships and parenting skills to reduce violence within family units and eventually break the cycle. The effectiveness of the study was measured through a randomised controlled trial. Response rates were high and remained this way over time, sitting at roughly 80%. The study found that at the end line, men who attended at least one individual and one group mentoring session had twice the odds of men who did not, to show positive attitudes towards their children through involvement of activities. The study also found that physical violence declined over time among the entire sample, from 38% at the start point to 12% at long-term follow-up, showing an improvement of 16% in just 2 years. Similar workshops and programs have been held in PNG, which were later expanded to Men's Matters and eventually the Men's Movement. While there were qualitative indicators of success, the lack of follow-up and measurements of success or failure caused their outcomes to be deemed undeterminable and thus ineffective.
It's not enough to simply pay for a workshop where people get to attend and then go home and the behaviors stay. We need that to be accompanied by rigorous evaluations that actually track those changes and make sure that it's happening. Because also a lot of the programs after 6 months, the men start to do sort of, slipping back into behaviors like the drinking, like the wife beating. And most of the results of these evaluations they're self-reports, right? So the participants know what's it called, social desirability bias. They know what the researcher wants to hear, and they say, I know I shouldn't beat my wife. But that we never ask the wife, so what happened? Did you get beaten up less? So that's also a flaw, I think, and from a research side, I'd love to see those programs, like the one you talked about in PNG, accompanied by feedback in qualitative or quantitative studies, feedback from the children if they're old enough, and from the partners. What changed since they went to that workshop?
A cultural adjusted program of this kind is recommended for implementation in PNG, with effective measurement techniques required. With implementation of a program similar to that of the Real Fathers initiative, there is hope that violence against women in PNG has been significantly reduced by the end of the Sustainable Development Goal era. Goal 5 aims to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. To do so, the UN have set out 9 targets and 14 indicators that must be followed. Once addressed, not only is there expected outcomes in gender-based violence, but significant improvements in community development, economic growth, literacy rates of women, and reproductive and sexual health. The indirect improvement within communities shows the importance of developing a comprehensive strategy in improving gender-based violence and PNG.
But unfortunately, this won't be easy. There are a number of barriers and limitations that must be considered when implementing prevention programs. Measuring the impact of gender-based violence and the success of current programs is essential. Currently in PNG, there is a lack of measurement of both. While there has been qualitative data of individual experiences of violence, as well as small pockets of quantitative data, there is an urgent need for further research. However, this measurement is not simple, as violence is often considered a private issue that must be kept within the home. Therefore, information is underreported. The strategy of data collection must be combined with significant behaviour change to ensure that women are not only supported when speaking up against household violence, but there is understanding that this violence cannot be normalised. There is need for regular and holistic quantitative studies across the entirety of PNG to show the true extent of gender-based violence, give an insight into places of highest risk, and enable progress studies of intervention. This will allow the design and implementation of a fully informed program, increasing the likelihood for positive effect. Due to the geographic nature of PNG, each community is not only so culturally diverse, but the remoteness limits access. This hinders the ability to create a single program that can be implemented across the entire country. For future preventative programs, it is essential to provide an individualistic framework that can be altered to consider these differences. Programs intended for implementation must undergo significant cultural analysis to ensure that they are accounting for the specific situation within each community, including current social norms surrounding violence. To overcome this, we recommend that local stakeholders are actively involved in both the design and implementation to ensure a thorough understanding of the demographics of each location. By involving local leaders who hold influence in community, we aim to improve the response to and involvement in these programs. With experience in violence against women and children in West Papua, Dr. Lauren Rumble spoke about difficulties faced when seeking funding for such programs.
Social norms change is critical. It's one of the hardest areas to work on because it requires long-term funding, multi-year funding. Most donors give 1-year funding and want to see immediate results. And secondly, because there's such a wealth of bad practice, large campaigns, media blast outs, leaflets at health facilities, things that simply are not effective but are cheap or visible. And so politicians who have maybe 1 year to show progress in addressing violence against women will employ those cheaper, supposedly quick win strategies. And that's why we've seen so little growth in this area.
We hope that if there is initial funding for measurement of the issue, then the information from these studies will inform the appropriate stakeholders of not only the importance for programs, but also the ineffectiveness of the current short-term band-aid fixes. The aim in this is to increase the funding received for long-term social norms-based programs so that significant change can be seen within the era of the SDGs.
One intervention on its own is not going to end violence against women, right? This is so clear in the guidelines and in the international frameworks, but in reality, we tend to have 1 or 2 targeted approaches only and then wonder why the violence levels are not dropping.
Dr. Rumble indicates the urgent need for action, so women like Nina are not alone. With support from entire communities, particularly men, coupled with effective measurement techniques, fundamental social norms and behaviour change can be seen. Let's break the vicious cycle of violence before it affects even more women like